Hey folks, it's Nate, and thanks for joining me as we once again look to the horizon. I don't actually have a notebook with me today because mostly I want to talk about feedback. I've been getting a lot of feedback actually on ongoing fiction projects. I've gotten the second round of feedback on Night Train to Hardwick in. I've gotten some other feedback on projects that I have not yet discussed here that I am kind of sitting on for right now. And I wanted to talk about when you know you're getting the reaction you want versus when you don't. And sometimes that is explicitly said to you by the people you are getting feedback from. I was recently told that the dynamic between the Fairchild siblings in Night Train to Hardwick came off in a very specific way, and that the reader really enjoyed that. And I was very gratified to hear that because that was the exact impression I was hoping people would take away from reading those sibling interactions. And when you get that kind of feedback, that is the best feedback because it's unprompted. You're not asking any questions. You're not putting somebody's attention someplace where it wouldn't normally be. And they just say, hey, you did the thing I wanted that you were hoping to do. And that's really great. But not all feedback comes that way. I did a writing seminar recently where I submitted some prose to a professional editor who knows a great deal about the craft of writing, Professor Geek, or Michael Kritzer, as he is known in the professional world. And that was a very different kind of feedback. We had about a 25 to 30 minute post-mortem conference as we talked about the story and what he thought of it. And one of the things that I wanted to know, it wasn't a full story. I should say that it was not a full story. It was just a couple of pages, the first couple of pages, and I was looking specifically to gauge what he would think was coming in the rest of the story, and I wanted to make sure expectations were being properly set. And that was not, for better or worse, that was not a part of the feedback he just wrote out and gave to me. And I think a lot of people who offer feedback on people's stories don't talk about their expectations very much, which is, I think, a little odd because managing expectations is a big part of building audience engagement. Because if you set one expectation and well, let me put it another way. If you go to set expectations and the audience gets the wrong expectations, and then when you finish your story, you've executed on what you were hoping them to expect, but they weren't, you can actually create more disappointment than if you just told a normal story badly. So I think managing those expectations is really important, but particularly in an instance where I was trying to set up a very important danger that one of the protagonists would face without anyone recognizing that it would be a danger he would have to face. I had to rewrite a section a couple of times to get the wording right, and then in order to make sure I had gotten it right, I also had to explicitly ask for that piece of feedback. And that is difficult because I don't know to what extent my asking that question puts a focus on it, and that focus can go either way. Well, maybe they say, no, I wasn't thinking anything about that at all. And on the flip side of the coin, maybe they say, well, I wasn't thinking about it until you said something, or I was thinking about it, I dismissed it, or there's a whole lot of false positives or false negatives you can get when you spotlight a piece of the story that way. But sometimes you have to, if you're looking for something that specific, which your audience, your test readers do not address. It is definitely important to get that specific sometimes. If it's important. If it's not an important detail, I would let it slide, and just hopefully when your test audience gets to the payoff for that detail later, they will give you some feedback on it. Now, if they don't give you any feedback even after the payoff, you definitely need to ask about it then. Because if you're trying to set something up that will really play to an audience and they get no reaction at the setup and no reaction at the payoff, you have really missed. And you may need to just draw their attention to it so you can get feedback on how to bring their attention to it better. And I say all this because I always hesitate to ask those questions, and I imagine a lot of other writers do as well. We want our audience to have very organic reactions to a story. We want that kind of feedback where the audience just comes out and says to us, "Oh yeah, that's great. I saw this thing, and I really liked it." And we're like, "Oh yes, I wanted you to see that thing." But sometimes, especially when you are trying to keep something out of their view for a while, you need to paradoxically bring it to the attention of the people who are giving you the feedback to make sure you're actually accomplishing what you're hoping to accomplish. And if you are test reading for people out there, and you see something, you're like, man, should I make something out of that or not? Always bring that up. It's really, really helpful to have the feedback that, oh, I saw this thing and I don't know if it's important or not. Because sometimes you are supposed to see that thing and think that it's important. Sometimes you're supposed to see the thing but not think it's important. And sometimes it's not supposed to stand out to you at all, and it's actually a sharp edge that needs to be smoothed out of the story. Regardless, that's something the person who is asking for feedback needs to hear. So don't be shy about bringing those things up. And if you're the writer, definitely go and seek out that kind of feedback. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Kind of a short vlog, but it was an interesting thing to look at from those two sides of it. As I was trying to incorporate that feedback into my stories, I found myself mulling over this topic a lot. I thought I would share it with you, and hopefully you have found it interesting or useful. And if you have other kinds of questions you typically ask when you are trying to noodle out what your audience, a test audience especially, has gotten out of your works of fiction, please share them below, because I think that would be really valuable insight to have as I try and get better at this whole feedback process. Because let's face it, sometimes we just don't get a whole lot, and it's better to have it than not. Anyway, there's a like button and subscribe button down below. You can use them as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.